The United States President Joe Biden has reached Japan for the G7 summit in Hiroshima. His visit comes a day after Biden held talks with his Republican opposition about the U.S. debt ceiling. After attending the summit, Biden will then return to Washington, skipping the Quad meeting to deal with the debt crisis at home. Ahead of the G7 summit, Japan's Prime Minister Kishida held bilateral talks with his Italian counterpart Giorgia Meloni. During the meeting, the leaders agreed to deepen their ties as Italy is all set to take over the G7 presidency from Japan in 2024. Kishida offered his condolences after Italy was hit with torrential rains which killed 9 people and thousands have been evacuated. Florida's Governor Ron DeSantis has signed a bill that bans gender-affirming care for minors, which also targets drag shows, restricts discussions of personal pronouns in schools, and also forces people to use certain bathrooms. A large part of DeSantis' agenda is to make an anti-LGBTQ legislation as he prepares to get a Republican presidential nomination. The Democrats, however, have opposed the law, and some LGBTQ rallies were also held outside the Capitol during the session. The Moldovan President says his country wants to join the European Union as soon as possible to protect the country from Russia. The nation, which consists of 2.6 million people, is located between EU neighbor Romania and the war-torn Ukraine. Moldova is all set to hold its first European summit, which will be attended by all the 27 member nations. The Islamabad High Court has ordered the release of senior Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf leader Shah Mahmood Qureshi. Qureshi was detained by the Capitol Police last week. Several PTI members were arrested for inciting violent protests after the former Prime Minister Imran Khan's arrest in the Al-Qadr case on May 9th. The Chinese President Xi Jinping held a meeting with his Kyrgyzstan counterpart Sadir Japarov at the Central Asia Summit that's underway in Beijing. Xi's bilateral talks with Japarov come a day prior to the group meeting with Central Asian leaders. This will be the first in-person meeting of the 6 leaders. The 2-day summit will collide with the G7 meet in Japan, where China's economic coercion is likely to be on agenda. China is set to resume imports of Australian timber. Talks are on for the visit of Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese to Beijing. Australia's annual timber trade with China, which was once $407 million, was suspended in 2020 after Beijing found pests in the shipment coming from several Australian ports. Australia's government is pushing for an end of several Chinese unofficial bans on various Australian products such as coal, timber and lobster since 2020. The Australian Foreign Minister Penny Wong has confirmed Canberra's strategic security partnership with the Philippines. This comes after the bilateral meeting held between Wong and a counterpart in Manila. Wong, during a joint conference with the Philippines Foreign Minister, made the announcement that Australia had decided to remain committed to working closely with the Philippines. The Canadian Prime Minister and the South Korean President held a bilateral summit in Seoul as both countries explore ways to expand security ties, including intelligence sharing. This comes as both countries try to navigate a rivalry between the United States and China. On Wednesday, the Canadian PM said that Canada is ready to partner with South Korea on critical minerals, clean energy projects, and to fend off North Korea's nuclear threats. This summit comes as both countries mark 60 years of bilateral relations this year. They are expected to issue a joint statement mapping out their partnership for the next 60 years. Japanese lawmakers rallied outside the House of Representatives to condemn the government's plan to discharge contaminated wastewater from the Fukushima nuclear power plant into the sea, calling it a serious breach of contract. The lawmakers argue that the government had previously stated that a discharge plan will be based on the consent of local people. Protesters say the discharge of nuclear contaminated water containing radiation into the sea will become a very serious problem later. Thousands of Argentinians flooded the Buenos Aires main avenue to protest against hunger and the measures adopted by the government to comply with the IMF's $44 billion loan deal. People of all over the country came to the capital to set up an encampment to put pressure on the Ministry of Social Development. This comes after Argentina's economy minister announced a package of measures including new interest rate hikes, more central bank interventions in currency market and fast-track deals with creditors after inflation overshot all forecasts last week. Thousands of Israelis protested against the government's 2023 budget, which will give hundreds of millions of shekels to the Jewish ultra-Orthodox community. Strained by months of unprecedented protests, the government has set $3.8 billion for coalition funds, money to finance political deals with the ultra-Orthodox Jewish and pro-settler parties on which Netanyahu's coalition depends. This comes as state support for ultra-Orthodox institutions and community, as well as exemptions from military service, have long been an irritant to many Israelis. 4 children from an indigenous community in Colombia were found alive more than 2 weeks after their plane crashed in a thick jungle. The plane was en route San Jose when it crashed due to an engine failure on May 1st. 3 adults, including the pilot, died as a result of the crash, and their bodies were found inside the plane. The 4 children, aged 13, 9 and 4, as well as 11-month-old baby, survived the impact. Preliminary information from the Civil Aviation Authority suggested the children escaped the plane and set off into the rainforest to find help. France's founder Elizabeth Holmes will begin serving her prison sentence on May 30th for defrauding investors in the failed blood testing startup once valued at $9 billion. Elizabeth Holmes will begin serving 11 years and 3 months in prison. Earlier, Holmes had appealed to pause her sentence on April 25th, 2 days before she was originally supposed to report to prison but was denied. Eight people have been killed in a central province of Pakistan's Punjab province. Mostly women and children were victims in a rain-related accident such as collapsed roofs and walls. According to the Pakistan Weather Department, rain will continue in the upper and central parts of the country. Wind and dust storms are also expected in parts of Pakistan's Kashmir and Punjab region. Helicopter teams rescued 9 people from their flooded homes in the Italian region of Emilia-Romagna after torrential rains battered the area. At least 8 people were killed and thousands were evacuated from their homes as torrential rain triggered floods and landslides. One of those rescued by the helicopter was a pregnant woman. She was winced up into a helicopter and transported to an area where she could receive medical attention. Hundreds of emergency personnel from the police, the fire brigade and the Coast Guard have been involved in the rescue operation for over 24 hours. Land subsidence in the northern Peruvian district of Chanque destroyed at least 4 homes. China's COSCO shipping company suspended construction on a tunnel for a major port project in the northern Peru region after a partial landslide struck and is working to find the cause behind it. The local criminal prosecutor's office has opened an investigation into COSCO shipping ports in the region for its alleged responsibility in damages endured by the locals affected by the sinking. The Chinese company is building a 1.8-kilometer tunnel designed to cross under the residential neighborhood to connect a highway with the port. In a first, Mexico has issued a passport with non-binary gender. This makes Jesus Bena the first non-binary person to receive the passport. In addition to this, the Mexican authorities also issued 2 more non-binary passports to 2 Mexican residents in Houston. The passport was handed to Bena on the International Day Against Homophobia. The Mexican Foreign Minister considered this a very important step for the community. To celebrate the 10th anniversary of the gay marriages in Paris, crowds of LGBTQ rights supporters danced with vigor in front of the Paris City Hall. Hundreds, including several same-sex couples, cheered and danced to loud music. To celebrate the remarkable day, France enacted a law granting same-sex couples the right to get married and jointly adopt children in May 2013, becoming the 13th nation worldwide to legalize gay marriages.